Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the March 16th, 2023 Baltimore City Planning Commission meeting. I thank you for your patience as we started a little bit late. My name is Sean Davis. I chair the commission. Sitting next to me is Chris Ryer, the Director of Planning and Secretary for the Commission. Mr. Secretary, you call roll.
Robin Allen.
Present.
Victor Clark.
Present.
Marcia Collins.
Present.
Eric Costello. Not present. Talib Horn.
Present.
Tom Previs.
Present.
Eric Stevenson.
Present.
Justin Williams.
Present.
And Sean Davis.
Present. We have before us our minutes from our March 2nd, 2023 meeting. Anybody have any questions or comments regarding those? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Vice Chair. Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Next, we have CIP transfers. Under our consent agenda, we have CIP transfers from the Board of Estimates meeting on March 15th. There were 6 items included in that. Anybody have any questions or comments regarding those items? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
So move.
Thank you. Commissioner Clark, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Allen. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Next, we have minor subdivision final plans 3901 through 3925 Fort Armistead Road in the 10th District.
If I may, I wish to recuse myself, and I'm going to leave the room for a moment.
You don't have to do that, but okay. Any questions or comments regarding that? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
Motion.
Okay, we have Vice Chair Stevenson, second.
Second, Clark.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Mr. Previous, Commissioner Previous, you come on back in. That's a first.
I was more involved in that than typically. So.
Okay. Final consent agenda item is minor subdivision final plans 1500 Havenwood Road, 1600 Argonne Road or Argonne Drive in the 3rd District. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Allen, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Horn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
For the record, I'm going to abstain from this vote. I think I worked on this at some point in the past.
And I'm going to abstain as well because my company did the subdivision plans. All right. Now, moving on to our regular agenda, I turn it over to Mr. Secretary.
The first item on the regular agenda is the fiscal year 2024 through 2029 Capital Improvement Program, the recommendations and the vote. Sarah Parnillam will present today.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Sarah Parnillam, Division Chief for Policy and Data Analysis with the Planning Department, and I am going to present the recommendations for the FY 24 to 29 Capital Improvement Program on Kristen Ahern's behalf. So she was here 2 weeks ago, and there was an extensive work session going through the recommendations, and we're here again as a follow-up and for the vote. So on your WIX page, you should have a bunch of materials related to this item, including the staff report and the presentation. You also have a list of the changes from what we saw on March 2nd. So you can see there are very few changes, but we have listed all of those for you. You also have updated, all of the 6 reports have been updated, so you have those available for you. And then there were a series of questions when we did the work session 2 weeks ago, and so we have provided follow-up items on each of those. And if you have any additional questions, I'm happy to answer those. So I'm going to go through this relatively quickly because this is essentially the same as what we looked at 2 weeks ago when we had the work session and went through the recommendations. As I mentioned, there are very few changes. So a capital project, per the Board of Estimates, a capital improvement is a physical betterment or improvement or any studies related to it. There are a few items that are not qualified as a capital improvement, improvements costing less than $50,000, vehicular equipment, repairs or maintenance costing less than $100,000, or emergency in nature, and salaries that are not capitalized as part of a capital project. This is one of the charter requirements of the Planning Commission to submit a recommendation for the 6-year capital improvement program. This gets submitted to the Board of Estimates, and we go through this process every year for a 6-year plan, the first year of which is approved by the City Council. Just wanted to refresh everyone's memory in terms of the loan authorization. This guides our recommendations for the capital improvement program. One of the important fund sources for the capital improvement program is our general obligation bonds, and those are authorized through the loan authorization. We have to be in keeping with what was authorized by voters when we make our recommendations. Here's the breakdown by fund source for FY24, the first year of the capital improvement program. So you can see the total is $887 million, and you can see the breakdown by fund source here. And just to show you that more graphically, you can see that the utility revenue bonds and the county grants, both of which are used by Department of Public Works, make up the majority of the capital budget. The discretionary sources are a much smaller portion of our capital budget. Then if you want to look at that same $887 million that's proposed for FY24, you can look at it by agency. So this is the breakdown by agency, and then we're also showing you the total funds for each agency, as well as those fund sources that we do have the most discretion over, the general obligation bonds and the general funds. And this is just showing you the trends for those general fund back sources over the last couple of decades. So we're just going to go through agency by agency, line by line, the recommendations for FY24. You will see what the agency requested, and then you will see what the Planning Department is recommending. And where that is different from what was requested, we've tried to highlight that for you. So for the Baltimore City Office of Information and Technology, there are 3 categories of projects that they're pursuing, and we're recommending funding for all 3, but not at the levels they requested. You'll see it for all of the agencies, the requests are much higher than what we're able to recommend. This is on purpose. We asked the agencies to submit requests that far exceeded the available resources. We wanted them to put their needs and priorities on the record so that we could review them and have that information available for everyone.
Mr. Chair, if we have questions, may we ask on a, should we hold them to the end or ask on a case-by-case slide basis?
It's probably easier as we go.
I think that's probably right. Okay, thank you.
Did you have a question?
I didn't, but I was just thinking ahead that if I wait till the end, we're gonna miss the moment on the slide.
Okay, but there wasn't one. Okay. Here are the projects for mayoralty. Most of these are for cultural institutions. We do a separate process where we review applications from cultural institutions, and so these recommendations are in keeping with that process. And we have for you a map showing you the locations of those projects. For the Department of General Services, here's a list of the projects.
Could I quickly ask when the City Hall stone will be complete? It's been so many years.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna have to look
Yeah,
up.
it's a lot of stone. It's like a 20-year. It's like a 20-year project. That's fine. I just.
No, we're closer to the end than that. Just give me 1 second.
Okay. No, it's fine. I just was trying to look for a time horizon generally, like how many more years will we see it?
2026 is the last year of request. So I can look some of these up. It's just I'm gonna have to go back and forth a little bit. But you can also follow along in the 6-year program on Wix. And so some of that information, if you're looking for descriptions or the outer years, you can see that information in the 6-year program.
Yep, sorry about
So
that.
that one, no problem. There are requests for the next 3 fiscal years through 2026. And then we also have requests for the libraries and the convention center. One of the changes that you'll see listed from what we showed you 2 weeks ago is that we have included, based on the Pimlico Local Impact Aid draft spending plan, we have included the allocation of those funds for the Park Heights Library. So that was missing when we came 2 weeks ago. And here's the location of all the projects for general services as well as convention center and library, which are handled by the Department of General Services. For city schools, the commission approved the capital improvement program for city schools last fall. That goes on a different timeline because of the state process for city schools, and this is consistent with what you have already approved for city schools. Here's the locations of the projects. You can see in red the major projects, and then all of the systemic improvements in blue. Those are your boilers and your roofs and your windows and your fire systems, all those important building systems. So moving on to recreation and parks, we do have a couple of minor changes from what we showed you 2 weeks ago for recreation and parks. There was a recognition that we had proposed a reallocation from Winans Meadow Nature Center. This was a project that had received funding previously, and we had proposed reallocating general obligation bonds from that project. It turns out there's less general obligation bonds. Some of the prior funding was state funds, and so we are just basically correcting for that with these changes. And here's the locations for the recreation and parks projects. Transportation.
I have a question for Rex and Parks.
Yes.
So I asked for just some follow-up information about the Dome project,
Yes.
and thank you, they did provide it, but I still have a question. So we're providing 500,000, but I think in the summary it said the project is 1.5 million plus, and my concern was would the 500,000 pay for the entire project? And so if the project is 1.5 million plus, I was wondering, do they have that? Have they identified that delta in terms of what it would cost to complete the project?
Yeah, I will confirm for you, but I believe there are private sources that are assisting with that project, but I will confirm for you.
Okay, I just think that's an iconic place. I think it'll be a revenue generator for Rex and Parks. So the sooner we complete the project, it'll just be great for Baltimore.
So if the city doesn't receive outside funds, we don't show it in the capital improvement program. So when the city receives outside funds, you'll see it listed. But if those are a contribution to the project that doesn't come through the city, you're not seeing that. So I believe that's what's happening in this case, but I'll confirm for you. So for transportation, we have alleys and footways. We have our bridges. We have all of our street improvements.
Go back one slide, please.
Yep.
Thank you.
Traffic engineering, street resurfacing. And conduits. So here's the locations for all of the transportation projects. And then we wanted to provide a little bit of history and kind of put in context. I'm sorry, this one's looking forward. Put in context the transportation funding. So this shows you what is anticipated to happen with growth in highway user revenue over the next several years. So we're expecting a large increase in FY26 and FY27, and we're using some other sources to kind of bridge in FY24 as we sort of wait for that increased funding in FY26. So we are using ARPA funds to help us with transportation funding.
Look out in 2028.
Yeah.
And so one of the goals is to have that new formula renewed. And so one of the ideas of putting kind of additional funding in FY24 is to have really highly visible projects that are very impactful to be able to make the case that we're doing good things with the transportation dollars.
And start lobbying our state delegates and
Yes.
Right. Especially the chair of the delegation.
So this one shows you the history. So this one is showing you over the last several years what was approved in transportation funding and then what we're recommending for FY24. And so you can see the total for FY24 as we're just looking at our local sources, not even thinking about the federal highway dollars. We are funding at a much higher level than we have in the recent past. I think this is the highest level of transportation capital funding since FY 2014. For solid waste, these are the recommended projects. And the locations. And then we'll just go quickly through the utilities. So we have the stormwater program, pollution and erosion control. And here are the locations for those. We haven't made any recommendations to change any of the requests that were made by the Department of Public Works for these utilities. So here are the wastewater projects and the locations for the wastewater projects and the water supply and locations for those. Here are the recommendations for housing and community development. Here again, you'll see a few changes from what we presented 2 weeks ago. Again, this is for the Pimlico Local Impact Aid. We're reflecting what was in the draft spending plan. So those still may change as that plan is finalized, but we have included in here what was in the draft plan. So you'll see Park Heights Home Repair Incentive, Park West Capital expansion, and the Arlington Inspire Garden in green because they weren't included previously.
I have a question on this. Those all sound like capital expenditures, but as I gave it more thought after our planning session, and I looked through the documents, there are a lot of programs in here that I think are not capital in any real sense. And I was just trying to wonder, for example, on the senior centers, it says that it's to provide upgrades to senior housing, but also wraparound services. And I don't understand, I guess I was trying to understand what wraparound, I mean, is it also to provide sort of healthcare? Or do you know? I'm trying to find the number. Like, are we providing healthcare services?
Hubs program.
which line item are you talking about, Tom?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
I'm
is
tr-
hubs. I don't know
hubs.
what the wraparound services are. I can find out, or I don't know, Chris, if you know.
Yeah, I believe we're referring here to the Hubs program, which is a program that is partially privately funded by local foundations, but it provides
It is the
a-
Hubs program. Yeah,
Yeah.
5880 Oh, 052. Sorry.
So it provides I think there are 5 across the city, a regional social worker attached to a community-based organization that helps the senior figure out their needs for their home repair. So it's not health benefits or anything like that. It's just a support system for the senior to make the improvements. They've consolidated everything into one application, and I'm trying to hold people's hand through the process.
So I guess I'll just say that it is kind of a good example of my concern of money that's being bonded and, well, actually, 5 million of it's state funding, actually, I should say otherwise, but it's only 500 from the city's general obligation bonds, but yeah, it sounds like it's program and it's operational to some extent as opposed to infrastructure, and so just to note that. And then we talked about middle neighborhood support in the last meeting. And I wasn't sure if you said that was coming from the city's bonds or from some other state money. And I was just wondering I have a bit of a concern in terms of middle neighborhood support, in terms of operational money. I have a small equity concern there in the sense that if we're bonding $400 million for supporting neighborhoods and we're not doing it on a project-specific basis, why would it only be available to a certain income bracket that's a middle income bracket and not to say a neighborhood that isn't
Right.
as wealthy?
No, it's not. Yeah, I understand the confusion. So essentially, these are home repair programs for low-income homeowners. So it's not for
That's the middle
landlords.
neighborhood support, is that?
Pardon?
It's the $400,000.
Yeah.
400
Okay.
$400,000.
I meant to say
Yeah.
1,000.
And so it's for low-income homeowners in what they call middle neighborhood. So it's a retention strategy. It's to keep like seniors who can't afford to keep up their home from leaving. It's a vacancy reduction strategy.
Okay.
So it's not for middle income, it's for lower income in a middle income neighborhood.
Thank you. That makes more sense to me. I understand that better. All right, those are my only questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, here are your locations for Department of Housing and Community Development. And then last but not least is Baltimore Development Corporation. Here's our locations of projects, a list of projects and the locations. And then we shared with you 2 weeks ago our preliminary equity analysis. We will create an equity analysis report in June once we have final numbers for the capital budget, but we have updated these based on the minor updates that we have from 2 weeks ago. So these are the maps, both for all projects, excluding DPW, and then a map specifically for DPW. So you can see where the per capita allocations are concentrated. And then you can also look at that by race, as well as by median household income. And staff recommends approval of the FY24 through FY29 capital improvement program.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Are there any questions for Ms. Perrinelli? Please,
Just one.
microphone.
It's on, yep. Under transportation, there is a line for streetlights, and it's $0 requested, $0 recommended. Which begs the question why that line.
Do you have a number? that we can
Yeah, it's
check?
probably in an outer year, but if we can find the number, I can look it up for you.
Do you have the CIP number next to you?
Yeah.
Oh, you got good eyes. You can read that.
Is it 510001 LED conversions?
$510,001,
Yep.
streetlight enhancements and upgrades.
Probably in
It's up
their
there now.
operating budget, would be my guess.
Or it's a later year. It's not 2024.
Yeah, so funds are programmed in the outer years for that. So in FY '25, there's $1.2 million. It's a combination of federal highway transportation funds and highway user revenue. And that continues through the rest of the program at various levels. 700 in FY '26, 3.8 million in FY '27, 2 million in FY '28, and 1.4 million in FY '29.
That's great.
Yep.
Streetlights are maybe the only thing that everyone in this city agrees on, although not the type of lights. Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions for Sarah? Yes, Commissioner Horn.
Just have one question. This is Baltimore Development Corporation. I remember the last session, we took out the base network because we said that was operational in our capital. So I didn't know if you talked to Colin or, I know the base network is one of BDC's signature programs. It's in desperate need for dollars. And I didn't know whether or not he could sort of customize it so it could fit within our structure. I just wanted a follow-up conversation with him, that's all.
Yeah. So I understand that it's doing good things, but they're not capital related. So we did when the request came in, we forewarned BDC that we were not going to be able to recommend, capital dollars for it. I don't know that I've had a conversation with Colin himself. We can definitely set up a follow-up.
Are there any other questions for Sarah from the commission? Yes.
More of a comment in response to Commissioner Priebus's question. I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, that a number of things like the home program, the middle neighborhoods, and some other things that I saw under housing and community development, there's information about them on the Live Baltimore website. You can see a little bit of information. It might help give you a little more comfort about what those.
Monies are being spent for.
Yeah, and it is about retention and even first-time home buyers, trying to attract people to Baltimore City, retain residents, help people buy homes, so far. That's all.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Allen. Any other questions for Sarah? Thank you very much, Sarah. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to speak on the capital improvement program for 2024? No burning questions from the audience.
Forever, holding.
All right, it's done.
3
Now,
months, right?
thank you, yeah, exactly. Thank you very much. We'll close the public hearing. Any deliberations, discussions amongst the commission?
But I would ask to make 2 quick points. First, I wish to reiterate my abstention, I guess it's called, or it's in an asterisk on the minutes that I'm not involving myself in consideration of public works matters. And the second is just to reiterate a comment from last time and a view that I really do believe that we should try to continue to focus as we go forward the limited dollars we have on infrastructure needs. When we don't do that, it costs us a lot more money over time, and we push the obligation to the next generation, and they end up in a bigger hole than when we spend it on programming. And so I'm just one person, but I just wish to continue to hammer on that theme. But otherwise, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Priebus. Yes, Vice Chair Stevenson.
It's a purely technical question. So the $887 million in fiscal year '24, 761 in '25, 734 in '26, and then we get to the 6th year and it's only $419.
419 million.
Yeah.
I was going to say, we got big problems if it's $419.
So, I mean, I could speculate, but what is the reason for that?
Yeah, so at the beginning, when we talked about the fund sources, I pointed out that the fund sources for the utilities make up the vast majority of the capital improvement program, and those tend to cycle. So DPW will, in certain years, be appropriating funds for projects. They'll be in a planning stage, they'll be in a construction stage, and so they go kind of, it's not consistent, right, across every year. So it has peaks and valleys. Also, by the time we reach that year, there may be additional things that have been identified, particularly for DPW. I don't know, Commissioner Collins, I don't want to put you on the spot if you wanted to speak to that further, but that's the driving force behind that variation. This is a cycle of DPW projects.
So it sounds like you're saying both, that we expect to spend only 50% of what we're spending this year, 5 years from now, but also that there's funding yet to be identified that will increase those years?
It's not necessarily spending, it's appropriating. So we have to appropriate all the dollars for a project before we can start construction. So you may have peaks where you're trying to appropriate all the dollars so that a large project can get started, and then once that project is in construction, you're not appropriating as much in the following years. So it's not, the capital improvement program is not a spending plan year by year, it's the appropriations. So yes, I'm saying that will vary from year to year, and I am also saying that it could change. I am saying both of those things.
Okay, thanks.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, do I have a motion? Okay, not everybody at once.
Motion to approve the CIP.
Thank you, Commissioner Allen. Do I have a second?
Clark, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. Mr. Secretary, will you call roll?
Robin Allen,
Approve.
Victor Clark. Approved. Marcia Collins,
Approve.
Talib Horn,
Approve.
Tom Priebus.
Approve.
Eric Stevenson,
Approve.
Justin Williams,
Approve.
and Sean Davis.
Approve. Thank you very much, Sarah. I think as we discussed when we were deliberating this back at, maybe it was the January or February session, we started really, really early this year. I think our first presentation was January 6th on that, and I think that was probably difficult for the agencies, difficult for y'all because of the holidays and everything. I hope next year we can maybe push that back into the second week of January, give everybody a little bit more time, including you and Kristen. But thank you for all your hard work.
We get crunched either way. So if we don't start that early, then we get crunched on
Backside.
the other end, which we were even starting that early this year. But yes, I think you're right. I think January 6th is challenging for everyone.
Coming right out of the holidays, but thank you very much for all,
Yeah.
for yours
Oh,
and
it looked
Kristen's
like
hard work.
So today's exciting to me, not because we have just approved the 2024 budget, but because today should be the day that we start working on 2025. From your perspective, Sarah, I mean, is it like starting from scratch every year? I mean, this is a 6-year budget. In theory, the 2025 budget is already done, but does it not work that way?
That's a starting point.
It's a starting point, that's right. And I think our goal is to make that more and more of a real starting point over time. So one of the things that we hope to do, and we may not be able to do it for FY25 because we're transitioning to a new software platform, so your reports may all look a little bit different next year, but hopefully this all goes smoothly. But going forward, the idea would be that agencies start with year 2 kind of preloaded so that they're not starting from sort of a blank slate and making their requests. And so then it'll be easier to track kind of what you asked us to track, and it will be more of a starting point, like literally the way we do it in the software. So that's the goal, but it may not happen for next year, maybe sort of into the future.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So I also want to echo your praise. That's my first time going through the budget process. Probably been 20 meetings after hours and the weekends with you all. So I really appreciate the hard work you all put into this. And Sarah, you and Kristen.
It's really Kristen
Yeah,
gets
Kristen-
all the credit, and I'm sorry
Kristen
she's
was
not
sick
here today.
That's how much we used,
Yeah, it doesn't, I mean, the general public doesn't understand that the amount of time and effort that Kristen and Sarah put, or the entire planning, and all the departments as well, in terms of pulling this together. It is exhaustive, it shows its public face about 5 times here, 4 or 5 times here. And then obviously at the city council, but there's a ton of stuff that's happening behind the scenes. So thank you again. Okay,
Mr.
moving
Chairman, I'm sorry, very quickly, not to belabor a point, but I just have to follow up on Commissioner Previs's last point. I understand his thought that this is programmatic and it may not be in our bailiwick, but I disagree because I think a lot of these programs probably require a match. They probably come from, in some cases, federal government requiring a match. And I would argue that it is related to infrastructure because as we were discussing 2 meetings ago, or related to the upcoming bill about, I can't remember the word that Councilman Ryan used in his bill, abundant housing. If we don't help people buy housing who might not otherwise be able to with some of these programs, or retain the housing that they have, who might not be able to stay without help, we may have more vacants, and that's a terrible problem in the city. It creates a much deeper problem, and that's what a lot of these are about. It affects neighborhoods, and I'm a planner, retired, but still. I view that as infrastructure. It's a different type of infrastructure. It's not streets, it's not transportation, it's not underground and so forth, but it's vital. It's crucial to the city, so.
In a perfect world, the city would have the revenue necessary for our capital needs and our operations and maintenance needs. We don't. And so, unfortunately, we have to pull a little from here to put it over there so that it can be used in the most appropriate way to help solve the problems we face. So I think, again, I agree actually with both of you.
I agree with both of us too.
All right, moving on to the next agenda item.
Next agenda item is City Council Bill number 23-0352, city property renaming the playground and pavilion at Alhambra Park after Phyllis Gilmore in the 4th Councilmatic District. Marie McSweeney Anderson will present.
Hi, folks. Thanks for having me. I'm just going to have Phyllis briefly stand up. Just so that you all know that she knows who you are if you vote against this. So this was introduced by Councilmember Conway. He's not able to be here today, but David Pontius, his chief of staff, is here to be able to testify on his behalf. So for folks not familiar with Alhambra Park or the Woodburn-McCabe neighborhood, it is in the Northern Planning District, the Great Northern Planning District. It's in the 5200 block of Alhambra Avenue. It's bordered on the north by Glenwood Avenue and on the south by McCabe Avenue. This is actually the site of former vacant row houses, which were raised in 2001. And now has a playing field as well as a pavilion and a playground. It is zoned R6, and it is about a little over 0.3 acres of land, 0.33 acres of land. The neighborhood is mainly residential in character. Some folks might be familiar with Woodburn-McCabe just because of the work of Habitat for Humanity, who has really transformed this neighborhood. They've worked on a little over 20 houses just on McCabe Avenue. And folks who have been around for a while might know Woodburn-McCabe also as really the epicenter of the drug trade in the 80s and 90s. And this neighborhood has just undergone dramatic transformation over the past several years. Houses are really selling at market rate. And there's just a beautiful intergenerational community there. And I'm super grateful to work with Phyllis in my previous role. And so I'm very proud to be able to bring this to the Planning Commission. And this is, just in case Phyllis wasn't able to come today. Phyllis in Alhambra Park at National Night Out. So for folks who don't know Phyllis, it seems like every city department has at least a few people who know who Phyllis is because of her active engagement. But she is a dedicated community leader. She's the president of the Woodburn-McCabe Neighborhood Association. She's the vice president of York Road Partnership, and she also sits on the mayor's public safety committee. She's lived in Woodburn-McCabe for 18 years, and she's served on the Woodburn-McCabe board for the past seven years. And she took on this mantle of leadership from Monica Gaines, and they both have been incredibly active members in welcoming new homeowners, new Habitat homeowners to the community, and bringing them into the fold of this great neighborhood. And so since Phyllis's involvement, Alhambra Park has really transformed. There was, a playground full of graffiti, lots of trash. And so with her involvement, the street has officially been closed down to allow for youth to use both the field and the playground and pavilion area. There have been new trees. There's been some houses that have been taken down in order to have visuals into the park for safety. So there's just a ton of work that has happened here. And on an annual basis, National Night Out happens, turkey giveaways. There's a summer camp that happens in the park as well. So it's just a really active site for community residents. And as many of you know, I say that folks have to be a little bit crazy to get into community engagement work. There's not a lot of thanks that happens when you spend your blood, sweat, and tears doing community engagement work. And so this is really just in honor of the work that Phyllis has done on a totally volunteer basis. There's not compensation that comes from being a community leader, and so I think this name change really honors the legacy of Phyllis and her work. So needless to say, I recommend approval, and there have also been letters from Habitat for Humanity, District 43 state legislators, Baltimore City Police, as well as fellow community association presidents.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Are there any questions? Go.
I think that this is wonderful, and I can only dream that one day my community would honor me in such a way. I think I won't. I'm not. I think that this could set a precedent, not necessarily a bad one. My question is, on a prior renaming that we considered, I think it was for a school in this case, but part of the debate was that the proposed namee hadn't been passed for X number of years. Is that a rule that we're bound to? Does anybody remember what I'm referring to?
When you say pass.
It was a
I do.
school that we were talking about, and you did definitely raise that question. And I don't remember what the answer was.
Oh, I don't think I raised the question. Is there a rule that someone has to have passed away before something can be named after them?
I'm aware of at least one instance where a playground was named for Councilmember Spector, who, as of last notice, I believe is still with us and will probably outlast me. So there's not a formal rule, though it is not uncommon that they're normally gone.
I think that applies to streets and possibly buildings, civic buildings.
I don't know of any specific rule that stipulates that the name has to be deceased. I think it's a practice and a policy so that, God forbid, something happened to the person after the park or street or whatever has been named, and that that person does something wrong. It's more of a policy than a rule. So
I'm satisfied then.
Let's give them their flowers while they're still here.
I think that that's great, and if, to the extent that this, does change the custom, maybe that's a good thing.
yeah.
David, did you want to say anything, or?
Well, hold on a second. Are there any other questions for? Is there anybody here who would like to speak on this item? Please tell us your name.
Sure. Hi, everyone. For the record, David Pontius, Pontious, Chief of Staff for Councilman Conway. Marie gave a very able, complete, comprehensive presentation. But yeah, we're really excited about this opportunity to honor a leader in Woodburn-McCabe, 4th District, Baltimore City, someone who is a constant resource. I was talking with her about 30 minutes before this meeting started about a community issue, and she is a constant resource for her community, for the kids in her community. And yeah, we think this is a great way to honor her, and I would urge a favorable report from the commission. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions? Is there anyone else here who would like to speak on this agenda item?
Wow, I'm not surprised.
You don't
Good
need to tell us your
afternoon,
name.
Oh, my name is Phyllis Gilmore, Phyllis Gilmore. And good evening to the Planning Commission. It is my pleasure being here. And I just want to make a spill for a minute. I came in 2016 to be president for Woodburn-McCabe, which Woodburn-McCabe was a very, very distressed community. A lot of drug activity. Every block, every corner of my block had drugs on it. I made a commitment and a vow to the residents in this community, especially the ones that been in the community 50 years, that spent their whole life into the community, that I'm going to come in and try my best to make a difference, make a change, uplift this community, bring the community to a level where the community need to be, where people is thriving, where people is succeeding, where people wants to live, and our kids are safe. And I have done that. I have done that for 6 years in the community. Right now, we are in a good place with Woodburn-McCabe. I don't have drug dealers on my corners because I don't allow it. Properties is upkept because that's the attitude that I bring to the community, that you're going to upkeep your properties or you're going to face consequences in return. But we're on a great path, and, working with, I have Dan over here that is part of, a group that I work with, Marie and the councilman's office, and we're working hard, Habitat for Humanity. And I can't leave out of every single agency of Baltimore City, who is my concrete partner of this community. When I call, they come. And, I'm so honored. I'm so grateful of, we all was able to move a community to a community that is thriving now. Our vacancy rate is low, below 32%. When I came in, our vacancy rate was 89%.
Wow.
So we lowered that. I'm interacting with the youth on my corners. I'm pushing them into jobs. I'm making them get off the corner. I'm talking to them not as a community leader, but as a parent. This is not where I want you. I want to see you sailing. I don't want to see you two places, locked up or dead. I want to see you in a place where I can be rewarded that you are, and that's working, taking care of your family, and thriving. So I just wanted to give that spill of where we are right now and where we was at in 2016. A 50-year history of a notorious community that I came into. So I came in to help the prior president, Monica Gaines, and I somehow was pushed into being the president. But, I'm glad I'm here, and I will be here as long as I'm standing. So I just wanted to give that spill to the commission of, where we were and where we are now. Thanks.
Thank you very much. For the record, we also received a letter that was placed on our the dais today from a Sergeant Amy Street with the Baltimore Police Department. I don't know whether this is up on the Wix page. I just want to read something, the second paragraph, which I think is pretty telling. I have personally seen Ms. Gilmore clean the park on a daily basis, fix the swing when it was broke, and made sure the pavilion was clear of needles, trash, and other unsightly debris. She also checks in the park at late hours of the night to the very early morning for people or kids hanging out there for reasons other than the purpose of a children's playground. She has helped return missing children she found there and has broken up serious fights between children that were even in possession of weapons. Ms. Gilmore treats this park and her community as her own personal property. She not only cleans it, keeps it in order, but she also talks to the youth there and she lets them know she cares about them. I only wish there was a Phyllis Gilmore in every neighborhood in the city, so. Any other questions, comments? Yes.
Just want to congratulate you. I lived in that neighborhood, and my mother, and Sandy McFadden, and she lived in that neighborhood for a long time too. So, job well done. I just want to congratulate you.
Talia, I think this sets a good precedent for your mom.
All right, is there any further discussions? If not, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Thank you. Vice Chair Stevenson, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. I'm just going to say the whole commission. All right, with that, we call roll.
Robin Allen,
Approve.
Victor Clark. Approve. Marcia Collins.
Approve.
Talib Horn.
Approve.
Tom Previs.
Approve.
Eric Stevenson.
Approve.
Justin Williams.
Approve.
And Sean Davis.
Approve. Thank you again, Ms. Gilmore. Okay. Next, we have
Next item on the agenda, City Council Bill number 23-0359, a rezoning for 600 North Paca Street in the 11th Councilmatic District. Eric Tiso will present.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. This is a rezoning for this property owned by the Associated Sulpicians of US. So when we look over at the map, I think the pointer's actually working today. Yeah, it does. So you see St. Mary's Park is wrapped around the property on all three sides, and this one here is 600 North Paca Street. So that's it there. So a few aerials. This is from overhead showing the property outlined in blue with the park surrounding.
What does that mean? Know what that means?
Zooming in a bit on the historic chapel and Mother Seton House.
See if it's sulpicians.
Looking towards the north
I guess we'll find out soon enough.
and from looking towards the south. So while we're here today, this is a property that is currently zoned OS for open space, which is that diagonal line hatching that you see here in the center. That was assigned during the comprehensive rezoning process of the city and has remained since then. So we go back to look at what happened. The property and the surrounding properties were zoned R9, which was a higher density residential district at the time. We did not have a separate zoning category under the old zoning code for open space. So again, starting in about 2010, all of the community planners started taking note in their communities and drawing maps for the proposed districts at the time. That all got compiled into a map that was published in 2012 at the start of the comprehensive rezoning process, and it took 5 years to complete at the end of 2016 and went into force in mid-2017. So that's where we were. So if you overlay the two, the colors are the current zoning district. The red lines are the old zoning district. So just to kind of compare, where you can see there were some changes that were made. But we suspect that the mistake that was made was that the subject property was surrounded on all sides by a publicly owned park. And that's something that just was missed from the beginning. So the purpose of the open space district was to enhance the quality of life for city residents by permanently preserving public open space as an important public asset and critical environmental infrastructure. And that's straight out of the zoning code, the description of the district itself. So again, here's that 2012 map shading everything for that proposed open space district. So there's the property right there surrounded by the park. So that's the first reader map in October 2012. And there it is without any changes all the way through at the point of adoption and became the final map. So when we look at rezonings, we have to look at several things from state code. So namely, we have to look at the comprehensive plan. So yes, this was changed during the comprehensive rezoning of the city. Again, that 5-year process that I just talked about, but I believe that this was done in error and that it wasn't an intentional zoning change as part of the comprehensive rezoning plan. It was just missed because it was surrounded on all sides by the park. The campus itself doesn't meet the definition for open space. It's not a park. It's not publicly owned, and I think it was just included in error. It doesn't serve any particular public purpose for the needs of Baltimore City because it's not a park. It is a historic site, but it's not a park or open space in the traditional sense, and so therefore there's no particular need of the neighborhood, nor is there any open space being lost if this were to be changed back to a residential district. Similarly, we have a long list of things out of the zoning code, which also call back to state rezoning requirements, and these are more detailed in the staff report that you have. Population change was a slight decline of about 120 people from the 2010 to 2020 decennial censuses. No significant impact there. Public facilities are available and will be largely unchanged. The present and future transportation patterns will not be affected because it's an established community. The compatibility, it will remain compatible in its new residential zoning category. That's what it was before the comprehensive rezoning. And again, the relation to the city's master plan, we don't believe that there's any public purpose or master plan call for this property to have been rezoned to OS in the first place, and we believe that was just an administrative error. Looking at some of the existing uses around the property, you see residential uses predominantly around it, and so it will remain compatible with those. The classification of other properties are predominantly residential, with the exception of the C1 properties that are on the north side of Franklin. And so we believe that this meets all of the requirements to find that the zoning of this non-public, non-park parcel to open space was an error and that it should be corrected. Looking at some of the equity considerations that staff studies, we don't believe that there will be any impacts to the surrounding community, as this rezoning won't change the existing campus. It won't remove any open space or public benefit. Engagement, we believe that the community has been meaningfully engaged, and you should see that there's, I believe, a letter of support uploaded for you to read. There'll be no impact on internal operations for the city. With that, we recommend that you adopt the findings presented in our staff report, and we recommend approval.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tissot. Are there any questions for Eric from the commission?
And we do have representatives of the applicants here.
No questions from the commission?
Just one question.
Sure.
I agree. I think this is pretty clearly a mistake. My question is, there's a lot of trees on this property. It's privately owned property. And I know we're not considering any development approval here. My question is just, will those trees be protected? Like, when they go to build on this land, will there be any like forest conservation plan required, or will it not be subject to that if it's?
So anytime there's construction of 5,000 square feet of disturbance, it triggers forest conservation. So anything of reasonable size would hit that, and that's just generally speaking. Now, these are historic properties as well. So beyond just that routine development requirement, I'm looking at former CHAP friends that are now recovered and part of my division. I don't know if the landscape would come into play here, so I'll call a friend. Yeah.
Yeah, the CHAP design guidelines do include landscape. I'm Caitlin Audette with the Planning Department. And so potentially there could be a CHAP review of landscape alterations. Additionally, there could be CHAP requirements regarding archaeology if there was any substantial disturbance. And there's no trigger for that based off of development size. It's just based off of potential for archaeology.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Mr. Tiso? Hearing none, is there anyone here from the public who would like to speak on this agenda item?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Al Barry, AV Associates, here with the representative of the order, Sulpician Order, Father Daniel. If there are any questions, just to answer your question, this came about because of a addition to the existing campus for a residential facility that's very exciting. And we started the CHAP review. It's actually a pre-seminarian residence building that's replacing a parking lot. No trees.
Great, thank you.
So we are in the process of discussing this with CHAP. We've been looking into the archaeology requirement that CHAP has recommended we do. We have a preliminary proposal, which will be reviewed by CHAP, and we're hoping to get this on the CHAP agenda in April for the actual beginning of the building design approval. But we appreciate the staff's recognition that this was clearly a mistake. It's probably a textbook mistake one could imagine in the zoning code when you have an open space designation, it can't have any buildings. And they're really just assuming that it may have been city-owned or didn't look at the buildings that closely. So we appreciate your recommendation.
Are there any questions for Mr. Berry? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this agenda item? Seeing none, I close the public hearing. Any questions, comments, deliberations, discussions from the commission? After reading the staff report, I think it was pretty evident that it was as Mr. Berry said, textbook mistake. Okay, with that, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
So we have a motion from Chair Stevenson, seconded by Commissioner Collins, and that's to,
Was that you?
I thought it was Eric and Marcia.
And March.
Was that right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
And that is to approve or accept the findings of facts and conclusions of law as established in the staff report that this was a mistake in the last comprehensive rezoning. Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Secretary, you call roll.
Robin Allen,
Approved.
Victor Clark. Approved. Marcia Collins.
Approved.
Talib Horn. Approved. Tom Previs.
He's absent right now.
Eric Stevenson.
Approve?
Justin Williams.
Approve.
And Sean Davis.
Approve. Moving on to our last agenda item for the day.
Last agenda item is forest conservation easement modification for Notre Dame, Maryland University at 4701 North Charles Street in the 4th Councilmanic District. Amy Gilder-Basade will present.
Good afternoon. This item is a request to modify an existing forest conservation easement located on a portion of Homeland Avenue on the campus of Notre Dame of Maryland University. The proposal would reduce the existing 2.14 acre forest conservation easement number 3 by 1.71 acres and would offset this reduction by protecting 1.32 acres of existing forest and establishing 0.4 acres of reforestation area and new forest conservation easements to be referred to as forest conservation easements number 4 and number 5. The applicant is Notre Dame of Maryland University, and it's located in the Northern District. This is the location of the university campus. It's on the east side of North Charles Street, south of Homeland Avenue. And this is an aerial photograph of the existing campus. Does this work, Eric?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Point at the main screen. So.
Okay. The locations that we're going to be focusing on, this is existing forest conservation easement number 3, and the proposal involves this existing forest area over here on the east side of the campus. Then there are other existing forest conservation easements with specimen trees here along the Charles Street side of the campus. Focusing in further, this is a aerial photo looking from south to north of forest conservation easement number 3. The existing easement is 2.14 acres, and it contains mature specimen trees and mown turf. And then adjacent to the property to the east, there's a hedgerow. This is a view from the opposite direction, looking from Homeland Avenue South, the same piece of the property. This is the other location. It's an existing patch of forest on the east side of the campus, 2.54 acres. It's mid-successional forest. A portion of East Stony Run runs through the forest patch. Oops. Kind of coming from like up here and winds down around the library. It's kind of down in this location, and it goes past the library and continues to the south. There's also a 0.2 acre forested wetland within this portion of the forest. And we're also, as part of the proposal, considering this lawn area over here for reforestation, and then separating the property from the adjacent property, there's a hedgerow. And then this is the view from the other direction, from the north to the south, where you can see the library further to the south, and again, the existing forest patch. Some history related to the establishment of the easements. The university did a 1996 campus master plan, and then following up with that to prepare for facilitating construction of campus improvements from the master plan, such as relocating the loop road and relocating athletic fields. They applied and had a forest stand delineation and forest conservation plan approved by the planning department in 1997. And the result of that was the establishment of the 3 existing forest conservation easements, 2 of them on the Charles Street side containing specimen trees, and then the 3rd one on Homeland Avenue also containing specimen trees. I'll go through in more detail later in the presentation, but the basis for establishing the total area, there is something called the Forest Conservation Worksheet that's based on the State Forest Conservation Code. And starting from the point of the total campus property and the formulas in the worksheet, something called the break-even point, which is basically the amount of land to be put into permanent protection, worked out to be 11.3 acres as part of that process. And so that was the basis for the areas of those easements. So those easements were recorded. And then subsequently, in 2007, there was a right-of-way dedication of a strip along Homeland Avenue that impacted easement number 3. That was recorded, but there wasn't a recording of a change to the easement. So in the process of looking at this proposal and realizing that that easement dedication had already happened and had already impacted the easement, that has been factored in to the calculations. And then in 2011, the university applied to modify easements 1 and 2 for construction of an entranceway. That modification was approved by the planning department. At that time, that change wasn't recorded by the university, but in this process, we've gone back and reviewed and documented that it was approved by the planning department, just not recorded. And so the university has, in the past year, recorded that past approved change. Then the only planning commission action that I've found in the history was a 2012 approval of multiple structures on a lot for a new academic building. So looking in more detail, this is the 1997 Forest Conservation Plan. As I'd mentioned, the goal of this plan was establishing 11.3 acres of forest conservation areas. And so you can see the 2 along Charles Street and the 3rd along Homeland Avenue. So now getting into the request that's being considered today. The request is to make an easement modification to Forest Conservation Easement number 3, reducing that in area by 1.71 acres. So this is a change to what land is within that boundary. It's not a change to, as far as there's no proposal for removing trees that's part of this request. That would need to be a subsequent request and go through the development review process. And then the proposal for offsetting that reduction is to establish forest conservation easements number 4 and number 5, totaling 1.72 acres. A comparison of kind of the conditions of the 2 different easements. The requirements in the staff report are listed of the submission items required under the Forest Conservation Code, what needs to be submitted for this type of request. So the submission included a letter requesting the Planning Commission consider this item of easement modification. There was a submission of a forest stand delineation, which is some of the basis of the information I'm presenting here, comparing the quality of the trees and forests in the 2 different easements. They also submitted a forest conservation plan detailing out the proposed modifications, and then they submitted narrative text that describes the various conditions and criteria that the Planning Commission would be considering in making their decision. So focusing back again on Forest Conservation Easement number 3, that's the area along Homeland Avenue with specimen trees. There's some photos here showing the character of that with 42 specimen trees ranging in size from 20 inches to 63 inches. DBH stands for diameter at breast height, so that's 4.5 feet off the ground, and what is the kind of the width of that tree trunk. The trees in that area are 6 different species of oaks. The trees are mature and the ground surface is mown turf. The trees are primarily in good or fair condition, with some trees in poor condition. There's very limited amounts of invasive species in the area, mostly limited to the hedgerow along the other property with some poison ivy and mile-a-minute vine, and limited areas of steep slopes, less than kind of 10% of the area, and also some small areas of erodible soils. The forest stand delineation also evaluated the conditions of the forest. Again, the modification proposes to establish, so the total forest that is there is 2.54 acres, and the first line of this table is incorrect. The overall easement proposal is 1.72 acres, but 0.4 of that will be reforestation. The forest itself is mid-successional forest. It has one of the characteristics of forest is having multiple different layers of vegetation, having the tree canopy of the forest, having understory, which is lower level trees, and then having a herbaceous layer of vines and ground cover. The species overall that dominate in the forest are elm, ash, and red maple, with some other species mixed in, a total of 10 different tree species. Overall, the condition of the trees are ranging from fair to poor. With a forest stand delineation, one of the things that they do is, rather than measuring every tree, they take some sample points, and then within that area, kind of determine what the character is. And so by doing that, they do what's called dominant class size. So they have categories like below 12 inches, 12 to 20 inches, 20 inches to, I can't remember what the size is after that, but kind of these different groupings to say what's the general size range in this area. So that's for this area, 12 to 20 inches is the kind of the most prevalent size of trees, but there are also 30 trees within the easement ranging from 20 inches to 45 inches. There's extensive invasive species throughout the forest, including not as vegetation, but emerald ash borer beetle impacting the existing ash trees. And then with the vegetation, there's invasive Japanese honeysuckle, knotweed, and English ivy. There are several environmental features present within the forest that offer ecological benefits. The existing East Stony Run stream that I'd mentioned. The forest provides a stream buffer. There are also 30% of the area contains forested steep slopes. About 70% is classified as highly erodible soils. And again, earlier I mentioned that there's a forested non-tidal wetland. So the focus of the staff report analysis is going through in the Forest Conservation Code, which is in the Natural Resources Code. There is a set of conditions or circumstances where modifications to a forest conservation easement can be considered. So that's the first step of looking at this. So those conditions or circumstances are expansion of an easement, which this is not, correction of oversight or error, which this is not, modification to address environmental problem or public safety issue, which this is not, and modification to accomplish a public benefit, which the narrative in the application states that that's the goal of this. So then there are also 8 different criteria to be considered in the analysis of the modification. Only 3 of those apply in this case. So let me find here. So in the list of 8 criteria in the code, the 1st, 2nd, 6th, 7th, and 8th do not apply because the project doesn't involve an oversight or error, an environmental problem. I mean, this isn't intended, that's not the reason for the submission. It doesn't involve public safety issue. It will not completely eliminate an easement, and the reduction will not reduce the existing easement to less than 10,000 square feet in size. So those criteria don't require evaluation. The criteria that do require evaluation would be demonstrating the quantity of the public benefit that would result from the modification, showing that the applicant considered other options besides reducing the easement, and then demonstrating that the proposal meets the requirements based on the calculations in the Forest Conservation Worksheet and follows the steps of the mitigation sequence as far as what are the preferred methods for providing mitigation. Sorry, I need a drink. So looking at the analysis of public benefit, the top of the slide provides an overview of what was included in submission as the justification for public benefit, and then the staff determination. So for the existing area to be of forest to be placed in easement, which is 1.32 acres, the narrative provided documented the various environmental and ecological benefits provided by the forest, and also the benefits of the forested wetland, things such as filtering nutrients and sediment, protecting steep slopes, providing habitat, reducing runoff, and groundwater discharge and recharge. There's also a proposal for creating 0.4 acres of reforestation planting to expand the forested area, and so that offers diversity of habitat, it expands the riparian buffer, and it expands the wildlife corridor. So with the staff determination of the submission related to the public benefit, recognizing that the existing forest, according to the State Forest Conservation Manual, meets the criteria as being a priority for retention. But as documented in the forest stand delineation, the forest is in decline due to the condition of the trees and the invasive vines. The reforestation will expand the ecological services provided. However, the ecological services provided by the forested, they're valuable, but they're not created by the proposal. So the recommendation is to amend the submission to require some forest management steps for that existing forest to make sure that the forest continues to provide those ecological benefits into the future. So the next point to be evaluated is the evaluation of options to retain the easement. The submission documented that there's limited space available on the campus for improvements, and most of the undeveloped space on the campus is currently protected with forest conservation easements other than this location of forest that's currently not under protection. Specifically, the location of Forest Conservation Easement 3 was selected based on future campus planning and for subdivision. Actually, I'll go to another slide here just to show you what I'm talking about with this. So related to limited space, kind of the core of the campus area that's developed is here in the center. Along Charles Street, as I'd mentioned, there are two existing forest conservation easements with specimen trees. And then up on the corner here, there's another small cluster of specimen trees in that location. On this side, there's an existing stormwater management facility, and then the forested area here, and this area that looks like it has nothing in it has an athletic field. This property, which is currently not part of the campus, the university purchased a few years ago, and so what their proposal involves is taking a portion of this out of easement, and as they'd mentioned, subdividing and reconsolidating to have future opportunities in this location of the campus.
What portion is it again? Is it just the?
I'll have some plans that show it better, but I just wanted to go back for the context of what we were talking about. But there'll be additional slides that show this better. And then the final point in the narrative was stating that the proposed forest conservation easements provide greater ecological services than the easement area that they would be taking out of easement. For the staff review, with that review confirming the limited amount of space available that's not covered by existing forest conservation easements. I mean, there is space, but not equivalent space to what they are would have as a result of that subdivision and consolidation. It's environmentally preferable to facilitate redevelopment of the vacant property with existing impervious surface and a portion of the forest conservation easement versus an entirely green site within the campus. Any future development that would be subject to development requirements, including specimen tree mitigation. So this approval, if the Planning Commission would approve this, isn't approving removal of any trees because removal of trees isn't proposed. It would just take that out of easement, and any future development proposal, if there would be tree removal, a part of it, it would be reviewed and there'd be mitigation requirements at that point.
May I ask two questions about staff determination, or should I wait?
So Dane?
That's fine.
Confirmation, it's about the first bullet point and then the
Sure.
third bullet point. Confirmation of limited space and coverage by FCE. Why is that a relevant, why does it matter if they can build or not? As far as the legal analysis that we're concerned with, why does it matter that they're developmentally limited? Because I could just imagine a site has an easement, has absolutely no other chance. And we'd be saying, well, you can't build there. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, why is that relevant? No, I'm asking her. No, I really mean from a legal perspective, why is that a relevant factor?
So what I was doing was reviewing what they were stating and confirming that based on what I can see, there is a limitation
Okay.
of what's on the site.
So you agree with them about that fact, but
Right.
the legal relevance you're not necessarily talking about.
Right.
Okay. Is there a legal relevance to that fact?
Go back to the 3 points that you pointed out.
Right, so you're evaluating, did they consider options other than making the change to this easement in their consideration of options available for their campus planning? And so,
Go back 2 slides or 3
Sure.
slides to that.
well, actually, I'm gonna go forward.
Fine.
So this is actually the proposed plan.
Right.
And so I've shown kind of the areas with trees that are in that lighter green and then the ones that are within easement in the darker green. And then the rest of campus. So this is what we're talking about. The darker green would stay within the easement. The lighter green is what they're requesting to take out of the easement. And then this is the other property that they own that, assuming that the reason for that would be to plan for that area. And looking at this size of what that provides, there aren't really any other available areas that aren't already in easement. Like this is also would accommodate that size, but that's not what their proposal is. And I think that people would also oppose potentially impacting those easements. This area over here is kind of hillside. There's an existing athletic field. There's a parking lot here that's not kind of sized comparable to that. And this is more athletic fields and tennis courts. And then there's a stormwater management facility and the area over here that's currently not in easement that they're proposing making that switch.
Okay. Can you go back? Because my other question was
Yes.
related to the bullets, and I don't remember
Yep.
what it is anymore.
No, that's
Okay.
fine.
Would any future development be subject to development? Yeah, okay, so my question was, why are we bifurcating out the questions of future development and tree canopies and all that stuff from this particular analysis when it seems like it's all together? Because I could imagine a scenario where we approve something and it kind of, all those other considerations sort of are all part of that, especially when the thing that we're approving as far as stand delineation. It's almost like the entire plan somehow becomes relevant because it's sort of a shifting of parts. So I guess I'm concerned of looking at something so in the abstract that the next 2 legal decisions that have to be made become predetermined because of the order in which we assess it instead of looking at it as a big picture when we have 3 things that we have to assess. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, and I think it's probably best for the applicant to speak to the reason for separating them out. In general, one of my understandings is that the applicant for this request is the university because they're the ones who have control over the property, but the entity potentially doing future development might not be the university, and so they wouldn't have the right to make this request if they don't own the property.
That also gets to, then that adds to another question, which is, if master plan is a consideration, but the property ultimately isn't going to have a purpose that is even included in the master plan, are we making the right consideration at this time? I guess if it's being subdivided, is that going too far?
Yeah, I
of
mean, master
future?
plans change. I mean,
Yeah.
It's not a static thing, it's a living thing. And as a campus matures, the educational programs and needs of the.
Yeah, but that's the point I'm making is it even going to be part of educational programming such that it should be seen as campus anyway. Because it sounds like it's just a subdivision in the end.
And it may be that. but
Yeah.
That doesn't negate the
Well, if you-
colleges or the university's ability to do this. And it's related to the first, or the last question you asked, was I got to believe that, this is a portion of a larger project, and let's get this approval before we go on to the larger project. And if I just show you what's a part of this, it's not going to make any sense.
Right.
But as you say, as Amy's pointed out, that future development has to come back in.
Right.
And it has to meet all the rules and regulations for the development at the time.
Right.
One other kind of point to mention just about this process in general is this is a process that any property owner with an easement can go through, and there are reasons to do this that might not relate to development. And so saying that you have to have a development proposal to make this request would potentially be limiting on other types of requests that would not involve development.
Yep, it's complicated, thank you.
Yeah, it is complicated. Any more discussion on this slide before I move on? No? Okay. So then, related to the forest conservation calculations and the sequence for mitigation, this slide provides a comparison of the 1997 areas established in easement and what that totals. In the calculations, they allow for rounding to the first decimal place. So as I'd said before, the break-even point was 11.3 acres. The easements established were 11.27 acres, which rounds to 0.3. The new updated plan, there are columns there showing what's proposed as far as acreage, what the changes from the existing, and what the composition of each of the areas is. And so, as I mentioned previously, currently there are 3 easements. The one that we're discussing, the change, is 2.14 acres. You can see then in the next table over, 0.43 acres of that easement would remain. 1.71 would be taken out of the easement area. And then the area 4 would be 0.17 acres of existing forest, and 5 would be a combination of forest and reforestation area. And getting into the kind of the nitty-gritty of the forest conservation worksheet calculations and how that works, I kind of have a comparison here of what was submitted showing the 1997 calculations, starting with the total site area. One of the differences here is for 2022, it was based on what's in SSTAT, and for some reason, SSTAT differs very slightly from what was listed as the acreage in 1997. We don't know exactly why, but SSTAT is the record that is being used in this case. Deductions, the Forest Conservation Code allows for some areas to be deducted from the calculations. In 1997, there was a deduction taken for floodplain, but currently the floodplain maps don't show any floodplain on this property, so that's not a factor for the current calculations. However, there are existing utility easements that were taken as deductions, since those aren't areas that can be permanently protected as forests, since they are already placed in easements for other purposes. So once you subtract that out, you get the net tract area, and that's then what the requirements are based on. Then the reforestation threshold, that's kind of if you get down that far, then you have to start establishing more forest. And so in 1997, it was 8.43, currently 8.38. The existing forest in 1997, and this is a point too as far as explanation, it's showing 22.79 acres, but as you know from previously, the existing easements aren't forests, they're specimen trees. And so when this original plan was set up, it was crediting areas of specimen trees as forest.
Actually, that goes to a question I have too. In some ways, it's not so much forest, but that's a relevant consideration, but maybe net canopy. Because we keep looking at acreage, but it seems to me that if you could have 5 enormous specimen trees covering a canopy area that's, worth 20 minor trees. How much, I guess, was a calculation made about whether the degree to which the change is, if they change the easement, what the net canopy difference is?
Canopy is not a consideration of forest conservation, to the best of my
Is it
knowledge.
not at all? 'Cause
It's
we-
not a
We have a whole
specific-
set of policies and procedures for improving canopy as a city.
Right. The measurement of forest is different just as far as the character of forest and the different ecological services that it provides. And so that's why in the state code, certain things, like there's a definition of forest related to tree density and the types of vegetation. But I mean, specimen trees are also valuable for preservation, which is why they were put into easements in the first place. It's just that they're measured differently. And so, for instance, if they were to clear the forest that's there, and if that was required for their mitigation, there would be a way of calculating that and determining how much planting you need to do to replace that. It's a different calculation for specimen trees as far as mitigation. And so if there would be proposed removal of specimen trees, there would be a calculation for mitigation for that. It's just a different the way that it's calculated.
And that's like,
Canopy may come into effect
In the next
in our
question.
sustainability,
Oh.
our sustainability plan in terms of providing canopy for a
yeah.
variety of different reasons, but it's not part of the forest
But
conservation.
when they come and say, in like, I don't know, assuming like 6 months, we want to cut down 3 specimen trees, that's going to trigger another, well, then now you need 10 brand new trees or something. Is that something that's coming?
I missed the beginning of your question.
So eventually, let's assume this goes to a development. When the developer comes in with that particular parcel, which includes this, and they say, okay, we want to remove these 5 specimen trees in order to build X, Y, and Z, they're going to have to deal with the Forest Conservation Acts of that property at that time.
Right.
Right, so that might trigger us to say, or someone.
Or they're going to have to.
We'll
They're going to have to meet
add
the.
specimen trees or do one of those offsets or
Right.
something like that.
And-
That was like the Mercy case.
Another point to just understand about this is when that forest conservation plan was done, this property wasn't part of the campus, this additional property. And so this would have its own, it's not kind of captured in the overall forest conservation plan for the campus. And so this would apply as if there's nothing that's been provided. And so this would likely then, so if there's no forest, afforestation applies. And so you multiply the acreage times 15%, and then there's a calculation for how many trees. And so that would apply for this area. And then for any specimen trees, there would be the specimen tree mitigation requirements.
Thank you.
So find my spot again.
Keep going.
Yeah, sorry, just making sure that I don't.
I think it's the
Okay,
next one.
I think we covered this slide, right?
Yep.
Okay, ready to move on? Okay, and we were talking about this one. So going through the calculations, as I said, the specimen tree areas were included in the 1997 calculations. We ran these calculations based on the area within forest conservation easements currently, plus the forested area on the campus without getting into calculating all the other specimen trees on campus. And what that does, and there's 0 clearing proposed. Oops, sorry, I keep pressing the wrong button. And when that came out, it was saying the break-even point is 9.22 acres, which would say that you could reduce the amount of easements down to that amount. But based on looking at the starting point of the amount that was calculated in 1997, it doesn't make sense to say, okay, you had 22 acres in 1997, you can cut down trees down to this point, and then we'll just restart based on once you've already cut down trees to calculate the requirements for the overall site. So what we've done is base it on the 1997 break-even point. And so based on the tree canopy in 1997 or the forest, the break-even point with just the slight change of acreage for the property and the deductions, the new break-even point is 11.26 acres. So the proposed forest conservation plan, this shows those modifications that I'd mentioned earlier that had happened over time. So you can see the driveway constructed around 2011 that slightly changed the easements 1 and 2. And then the proposal for easement 3, which would move this area out of easement, retain this area, which is 10 specimen trees in easement. This line here is drawn in a location basically where it's kind of pretty cleanly between where the root zone for the trees in this area break from the trees in this area. So it's a logical point of separating it where you're not impacting with, if you're doing something over here, you're not impacting the trees that would be retained. As the staff report mentions, there are some existing utility easements through this area, and so those couldn't go into the forest conservation easement. And then also in the process of this, we found that there'd been a preliminary study by DPW for stream restoration of East Stony Run. And so for DPW's purposes, the applicant purposely left an area out of easement to accommodate future stream restoration so that there wouldn't need to be an impact. If there would be stream restoration, it wouldn't need to impact the easement. There's enough forest there that they could put the entire 1.7 acres into easement, but purposely allowed that setback for in case there's future stream restoration. This is then that lawn strip that's proposed for reforestation. Any questions on this before I move on?
Can you go back to one slide real quick?
Yep.
Just make sure that we're on the same page.
Yep.
When you say break-even point at 11.3 acres, that means if they retain 11.3 acres and they develop the remaining portion of the site 100%, that they don't need to do any reforestation or afforestation or anything. They've complied with their forest conservation.
No reforestation, no afforestation. If they're impacting specimen trees, they would still have specimen tree mitigation.
Okay, so at 11.3, they're basically good to go as is.
Right.
They are permitted to clear up to the threshold by mitigating with reforestation. The threshold is 8.47 or 8.43 acres. So there's 2.9 acres of additional forest clearing that they can do under the law, which would bring them up to their 15% threshold, correct?
The break-even point is based partially on the existing forest, and so you can't. The reforestation threshold is related into the break-even point from the sense that that's a point where if you clear that far down, then the calculation changes for how much you have to plant. So once they would go below the 11.3 or 11.2, whatever, they would start having reforestation. It's just that reforestation threshold is where it increases to discourage that amount of clearing.
So as I understand it, if they're at 11.3, you don't need to do anything.
Right.
You're good to go.
Yep.
If you go below 11.3 all the way up to 8.43, you've got to reforest at such and such a rate. You can even go beyond 8.43, but now you're really, really penalized in your reforestation requirements. Double, in some cases, triple. Okay,
Right.
so I want to make sure everybody understands that, is that they're
There's different
maintaining
tiers.
11.3, and by doing so, and by preserving this one area, they are basically saying, we don't need to do anything else on campus, other than if there's a specimen tree that we're going to take down for an addition to this building or that building. But they can clear down to 8.43, so the area that they're showing over in the...
Right, they could clear the forest that's not in an easement right now.
Correct, thank you.
It's really the 2.14 that's in consideration today, area 3. They're saying we take away 2.14, that'll make, we still have to hit 11.3. If we take away 2.14, we're gonna have to find 2.14 somewhere, or 2.17 or whatever, somewhere else to get them back up to 11.3.
It's the 1.71 is what they're reducing. So it kind of goes across as far as this number 3 lines up. Right now, it's 2.14. And then if you continue over, this is what they're proposing to keep, and that's the difference. And so then when you go down the column, the overall change is an increase of 1/100th of an acre.
Yep. Nice.
Thank you.
I know that this is all really complicated. I tried to lay it out as clearly as I could because it's crazy.
Well, that's net a plus of 0.01, but that includes the reforestation,
Right.
which is, not as mature as some of what is being removed. And I think that's where you get into some additional forest management recommendations.
So one of the reasons for, rather than looking elsewhere on the campus and establishing then another 0.4 acres of easement somewhere else, is that it seems like more of a gain to get expansion of this existing forest than just kind of choosing a random cluster of trees that's 0.4 acres and saying, okay, now this is an easement, because that's not something that currently exists. And so it's kind of seen as a given that, yeah, these trees are here. And so the combination of establishing a new forest area where there isn't a forest area and expanding this is what's part of this proposal.
And riparian forests are more valuable, at least in my opinion, they're more valuable than an upland forest because of further habitat for a variety of different reasons. So although the quality of the forest down in that stream may not be as high quality in terms of some perspective as a mature stand up by Homeland Avenue, then it's still it's a better forest in terms of long-term preservation.
Right. The other thing,
greater environmental benefits.
Getting into the next slide, which is then related to this conversation, is did this follow the mitigation sequence? And so the preferred option is preservation of on-site forest before considering other options. And so that's what this does, aside from the purposeful decision to keep out of easement the area that potentially could be impacted by existing stream restoration. Then the second option in that list is reforestation. And so that's where that comes out with protecting the forest that's there that's not within utility easements and is not potentially impacted by stream restoration, and then going to the next step, which is reforestation. And so with the evaluating the proposal meets the break-even point. It provides one-to-one area replacement. In addition, there would need to be mitigation if any trees are removed. It follows the spelled out sequence for mitigation. As I mentioned, it allows for future stream restoration without impacting the easement that would be established. And both any future stream restoration or future development would be reviewed separately for whatever the requirements would be for mitigation. It's just without a plan, you can't really evaluate the specifics of what would be proposed without the details of that plan. So as I'd mentioned, the forest stand delineation does document that the quality of forest is, it's rated as fair quality as far as it provides a lot of ecological benefits based on its location, but the quality of the vegetation is in decline. And so the one recommendation for an amendment to be considered would be to add a requirement for forest management recommendations to be implemented over a period of 3 years to control non-native invasive vegetation and establish reforestation plantings within that forest as far as making sure that there's the next generation of trees that will be growing up.
That's within the new forest, the new easement being established.
Right, both the existing.
Existing
yes.
forest, but new easement.
Yes.
Okay.
The planning department also does equity assessments of the items that are considered. This proposal has no obvious predictable effects on patterns of equity in Baltimore. There's no impact to existing trees or forests. There's no removal proposed. Any future modification as far as development plans could have impact on the character of Homeland Avenue, employment or housing opportunities, and existing specimen trees, but that can't be evaluated with this proposal. And so the equity of any future development would need to be evaluated at the time that there's a proposal to review. As far as engagement goes, there were community meetings held with the Homeland Association, Village of Homeland East and West, the Blythewood Association, and the Northern Baltimore Neighborhood Coalition. There are also some letters that were received that have been added in Wix that I'll speak a little bit more about. The university held walking tours of the property, 2 different walking tours in October. And within the past few months, the neighborhood of the Homeland Association has entered into an MOU with the university and Brightview Senior Living related to their own separate agreement related to the future development of the property and different conditions for a variety of things, but also including environmental design of the future development. And we don't predict any future effect on planning department operations from the proposal. So the staff recommendation for this item is adoption or approval of the item with the amendment proposed.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments for Amy? So have you spoken with the applicant regarding your proposed amendment to establish the forest management plan?
I have not, because that was just a recent addition to the proposal.
And I'm sure there are representatives from the applicant
Yes,
that
there
are
are.
in this room that can
Yep.
determine whether or not they're willing to accept that amendment. But let's just make sure, but you'll be next.
Yeah. But basically where that amendment comes from is recognizing community concerns. One of the letters that you have received, and this is community concerns that have been voiced also in other meetings about the quality of the forest, and going back to those different criteria that need to be met and what their application is based on is providing a public benefit. I feel like the standard that we would want to set is to make sure that whatever that public benefit is, that it's a lasting public benefit. And so I think that that's then makes it necessary to make sure that the forest is improved.
Well, and managing forest on a campus like this is probably a very good thing regardless. Are there any other questions for Amy?
Have the details of the forest management plan been specified, or is that to be discussed?
That would need to be discussed as far as they would need to submit. I mean, I've listed different factors that I would suggest be included in the forest management plan if there are other thoughts on other things to be added.
So you're asking them to submit a plan, not prescribing a specific plan?
Right, other than saying it definitely needs to address management of invasive vegetation and reforestation as far as filling in with vegetation being removed, making sure that there's replacement.
Great. Any other questions for Amy? Thank you very much, Amy. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on this agenda item? Pointing directly at you with your hand up.
Are we the final decision makers on this, or is this a recommendation? Yes, okay.
I say that very confidently, but I don't really know. I think we are.
It doesn't go anywhere else after this.
Okay, so yes, we are.
Good afternoon, everybody. Greg Fitzgerald, Chief of Staff for Notre Dame Maryland University. Thanks for having us here today. Just to respond to the particular question, we are perfectly comfortable with the amendment and we would support it.
Okay, great. Are there any questions? What? Don't go away yet. Okay. Are there any questions for the university? Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak on this agenda item? Please.
Chairman Davis, members of the Planning Commission, how are you? I'm Dan Pontius. I'm the president of the Radnor Winston Improvement Association. We're in the neighborhood directly to the east of Notre Dame, between Notre Dame and York Road. And Myra Brocious from our neighborhood is here as well. So I'm going to speak from a layman's perspective, and then Myra is a planner and an arborist, and she'll be able to speak from a more technical perspective. I participated in one of the tours that Notre Dame and Homeland organized in October, and we've been somewhat in touch with Homeland. We just got the MOU on Sunday, so we're kind of scrambling a bit to kind of get up to speed on this. But I just did want to, I mean, that is an incredible green space. I mean, that campus is somewhat magnificent next to our neighborhood. It was a real place to go during the height of the pandemic. The trees there, I think seeing them on the screen here doesn't do them justice. I mean, there are big, mature, majestic oak trees on the campus. And our concern is and I'm also a policy guy and a housing guy in my day job. So I understand the need for more housing. I moved both my parents to Springwell Senior Living during the pandemic. I understand the need for senior assisted and independent living housing here in Baltimore. But it sounds like this could be a good opportunity for the Planning Commission to kind of consider what are we trying to do with this forest conservation, these requirements. Obviously we want the city to continue to grow, but we want to protect our tree canopy, our environmental assets as a city. I mean, I think the idea, I suppose there is an environmental argument for the riparian area, but as someone who raised 2 children walking around here for 25 years now, the idea that is equivalent to these majestic, huge trees up on Homeland Avenue, I mean, that's obviously not what's driving this. It's not that the campus realized like, oh, actually, it would be more valuable environmentally if we preserve this area rather than this area. And so I feel like there are 2 options. One has been raised already, is to consider this whole thing as a whole, because that is the driving, so if we consider, I could see the addition of housing in the city as a public benefit. This argument of a public benefit seems a little bit of a, kind of a stretch to me. Or another consideration, I mean, the planning department is already recommending an amendment to the forest conservation plan. We have seen some of these majestic oak trees, I mentioned this on the tour that we did, die. I mean, a lot of from our perspective, we've lived there 25 years. In just recent years, there's an alarming number of mature oak trees that are just dying on this campus. And I imagine some of them are in the forest conservation area. There are also significant trees that are being choked by vines, particularly on the southern end, the border with the Hopkins property, I can't remember, the Evergreen Museum, yeah. So, I mean, I think Myra will speak to this more, but just from a layperson's perspective, if as part of the management plan, Notre Dame would really take seriously maintaining its forested, its tree canopy in these protected forest conservation areas, including replanting. We've seen oak trees die. We haven't seen new planting of new oak trees on the campus. So if that could be part of any mitigation plan, we would appreciate that as well.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for the speaker?
Isn't that what they're proposing, that they just said they would agree to? Or is it something different you're talking about?
I'm not clear if the forest.
What I took away real quickly was that the management plan that you're talking about is for the creation of Forest Conservation Easement 5, not for all forest conservation easements. What I think you're saying is that the management plan should take into account Forest Conservation Easement 1 through 5.
No, I understood it as 4 and 5 because there's an exist.
4 and 5 are on either side of the stream.
Oh.
So, yeah, it would be for 4 and 5 because they're split by the stream and the.
For the ones that are being I was understood it to be for the ones that are going to now count as easement and the one that's being added. That's where they need to do.
No, the management plan that we're talking about, that I walked away from was for, forgive me, easement area 4 and 5.
4 and 5, yeah.
Yes.
1 through 3 are not included in that management plan.
Because what I'm suggesting is forest management, and so the specimen trees aren't forest. If some other management, I mean, it's my understanding, I'm not very familiar with like kind of amendments to a proposal and how the Planning Commission adopts that, but I would assume that you're also able to include your own amendments.
Yeah, we're pretty nimble.
Yeah. Good.
And I think that's what you're You were talking about
That
as
is
a
my-
management plan for 1 through 5.
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
Yes, please, before you.
So before you step away, so I was looking at the letter that was submitted, and so what you're proposing is a modification. You're not necessarily opposing the action, is that correct? It was a letter of concern, and you were proposing ideas that would make it better?
Right.
Okay.
And I should reiterate, I meant to reiterate one of the points in the letter, which is that there is a herd of deer on the campus right now too. So any forest management or new trees need to have a plan to.
Get rid of them, you mean?
We got a lot of deer in the north and the northwest. I'm not sure what the answer is for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any? Oh, wait a second. We're not going there. Are there any other questions for Mr. Pontius? Thank you very much, Dan.
Hello. My name is Myra Brocious, and I'm a certified arborist, and I'm also a resident of Radnor-Winston Association. And I'm also a dog walker, so I know this campus extremely well, including the forest. And spend probably 5 out of 7 days there. So I'm going to maybe say some similar things, but frame it a little bit differently so that maybe it's helpful to frame it in public policy. I would argue that the plan as proposed has not met the test for public benefit. And I've heard the discussions about the fact that they want to transfer a mowed area with majestic trees to riparian forest. And I understand that argument that a riparian forest by state definitions and many environmental definitions is a better place environmentally to have a forest buffer. However, when we developed our plan, like many things in the city, if you look at the code, meeting the requirements of the natural resource article of the Forest Conservation Act is number 5 out of 4, out of 5 goals that we talk about in the code. And the first that we introduced was encourage the preservation and enhancement of the city's urban forest. That was an articulation of us valuing urban forest by definition in the industry are trees in a city. And it doesn't have to be a stratified forest with all the elements that grow underneath of it. So that's my major argument, is that I think we need to, it's not either or. Is this riparian forest better than the mature, majestic canopy trees that we all value? It's both. So I think we sort of see the inevitability, perhaps, I hate to say that, of this going forward. I would argue, similar to what Dan has said, that these trees on this whole campus and the other forest conservation areas on this campus have met the end of their life, and they're dying. And there has not been a plan to replace them. There has not been a plan to properly water them in drought periods. They're not well cared for. So if you're going to move an easement from an area that represents that value, the value we have for our urban forest, for our beautiful trees, for shade, for being able to see it from Homeland Avenue and the impact that makes on the livability of our city, the transfer that you're making to the riparian forest, nobody but me and my dog walkers ever see that forest. So it does have environmental value, and I totally agree with that. But you haven't then spoken to the loss, the potential loss of those other values of our urban forest. So I would strongly argue for a management plan that's also enforced to take better care of those other easements. And I'm also curious about when they put the front road in, was there any mitigation for that, or was it just approved?
I was not handling forest conservation
Yeah.
at the time, and so I don't know if it was, so one piece that I've spoken to the Planning Commission about on several occasions is the whole process of having, even in the code, a process for people to be able to apply for these changes and it coming to the Planning Commission. As you know from my presentation, there have been changes to these easements. They were just done at the staff level, not in a public forum, and there weren't kind of the different things that I went through as far as the different things to consider in making those changes or how you make those decisions. And so in 2020, when the code was amended, we did then add a section to the code to allow for these applications and spelling out the different things that need to be considered, because previously there were requests and there were requests approved, but it was just done on a case-by-case basis and not in a public forum.
And I guess I would, speaking to the nexus that I think has also been brought up here, we know there's a development plan coming. So we know that those trees that are coming out of the easement are indeed threatened. So there will be mitigation for those, but those trees are gone. They'll be planted by small trees, other places on the campus that over time, will grow to 100-year-old trees. But those trees will be coming down, many of them. So we need more than just this acreage one-to-one treatment. We need more than just the restoring the forest in the floodplain area. We need some assurance that the trees are going to be taken proper care of in the rest of the easements over time so that we can maintain this canopy forest.
So I have a question for you. So which organization are you representing? Are you representing yourself or an organization?
Radnor Winston, this is our president, so.
Okay. Okay, would your neighborhood association assist the university in terms of financially in order to manage that forest on forest conservation easements 1 through 5, since you enjoy them and participate in them?
Perhaps volunteer labor. I don't know that we have the financial capacity to do something like that.
Out of our $1,000 a year budget? Is that what you're talking about?
What I'm hearing is, and forgive me, I'm hearing that your residents enjoy these properties. You walk your dogs in them and whatnot, and you would like them to be preserved, and I respect that. Are you willing to participate in some way in terms of their management? Because I think it's a reasonable request of you to say,
Well,
let's evaluate.
I hear what you're saying. I would also suggest that the Forest Conservation Act regulates private land because we as a community value trees on private land. So that's the function of the Forest Conservation Act. I think we're just asking to follow the code. And they have to demonstrate public good, and I'm suggesting they have not demonstrated that they are going to replace the public good of those large specimen trees that are on their property.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I may just disagree with you.
Right, I mean, I would reiterate what Myra just said, that this is about what are we trying to do as a city, regardless of how much volunteer labor we're trying to get out of neighborhood associations. But I didn't want to cop to this in my testimony, but my wife and I did cut a bunch. We did the Ryan Dorsey video treatment of vines around one of the vine-choked huge trees on the campus back in February. And, I'm sure we'd be willing, there are people who are interested in saving trees from vines, which is a huge problem in our city. So it's not like that we're not willing. So I've already done it some, and I'm sure we have people who would be willing to sort of volunteer like that.
I responded affirmatively to volunteer labor. I said I wasn't sure we had capacity financially.
And my question is, I think your request in terms of managing forest and managing the forest of 1 through 5 is a very reasonable request. I would say in return, would you be willing to participate in that? If you're willing to participate volunteering, I would bet that the university would probably say, yeah, let's have a volunteer day to go down and clean out those forests.
Well, in addition to the university using some of its resources, to maintain its own property, right?
Okay.
I think it's yes.
Yeah, I
think
agree
our
with you.
answer is yes.
Okay. Okay. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak? Or I'm sorry, does anybody else have any questions for?
Question for the arborist or anyone who's familiar with the regulations. Is status quo, are property owners required to maintain the forest that's subject to a forest conservation plan?
It all depends upon what's established in the easement documents themselves. If the easement documents say, thank you. If the easement documents say that you have to do X, Y, and Z in terms of maintenance, then that's what you got to do.
Was there a question? I'm sorry, you didn't have your microphone.
Sorry, yeah, basically, does a status quo or like the general principle, do our property owners who have a forest conservation easement on their property, are they required to do the maintenance of the forest?
So the current agreements allow for forest management activities, but they don't set any sort of standard or reporting. So they are allowed to, but they're not, there's no certain standard that they have to meet as far as what activities that they need to do or how that's monitored.
Yeah, I think we would say we're asking for that in exchange for Planning Commission's endorsement of them transferring their easement.
Right, I'm trying to think through the
Yeah,
benefit part
yeah.
as well, because I'm thinking
Yeah.
through, though I never been a suburban homeowner, but I'm thinking about the forest conservation easements in suburban properties. I'm sure owners don't think about going back to do whatever is necessary to keep the trees in tip-top shape. They just don't mess with the forest conservation area.
That's
So-
it, pretty much.
And I guess the other question while I have you, so like the oak trees are falling or dying. So I've heard generally just thinking about like forest fires and like there's some benefit to having the trees die and then, I don't know, I guess they decompose and have benefits that way. So is that not the case here?
Well, it depends on what your goal is. Yes, a dying tree then returns to the ground and there's nutrients for the next forest. But in an urban environment, if you're not tree planting to replace them, then all you have is grass. So a management plan would ensure that there's something there to replace the tree that has fallen.
Also, I think that's kind of the difference that I think, Myra, you referred to in terms of the difference between a true forest and a more urban forested area like the campus where it's mown. Like you wouldn't leave a downed tree just to rot in the middle and mow around it or something like that.
You could. I would encourage that, actually.
Can I make a related point?
Please.
One of the differences also is the forest itself, as far as protecting a forest is the expectation that it's going to naturally regenerate and the next generation of seedlings will grow up and continue the forest. But the quality of the forest needs to be at a level where it's managed in a way that can happen. If the seedlings can't survive, then the trees that are there once they get to a certain age that they'll die. And then similarly, the areas that are being mown, you're not going to get that seedling generation because they're just constantly going to get mown down. And so without somebody actively planting trees in those areas, that's what it would take for there to be replacement since those areas are mown.
Very good point.
Mr. Chairman, I would also add that the deer population has stripped most urban forests in the northern part of our city, both east and west, of any possible regeneration. I see it in my own community, in my own property, and it's very difficult to protect what you put in effectively. They're almost as bad as squirrels. They find a way because they're hungry. There's a lot of them, they're hungry. So that's another challenge that everyone has, trying to maintain what forest they have. And I respect that problem. It's difficult one to resolve in an urban environment.
Also, I'll say, because there's so much information on this presentation and it's so complex, I'm not sure the quality of the riparian forest really came to view amongst you all, but it's very poor quality. And so the restoration is essential. It's been decimated by emerald ash borer. And the consultant labels the trees as in poor condition. It's just not my opinion.
Right.
That was included in
Some
the
fair,
staff
some
report.
poor, but
Yeah.
about half and half, yeah.
I'd add that I looked at the easements and we talked about it. It is for the purpose of, and I know there's regulations to move it, but it is for the purpose of the permanent protection of the areas on the property shown on Exhibit A. And so as we think of public benefit, it is significant that the initial intent was permanency. Just something I wanted to add.
Any other questions for? Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Doug McCoach, presenting as a citizen. I just want to say, as I actually said to Eric the other day, my 9 years on this commission is clearly the best job in my entire 40-year career. It's great. It's hard, but it's great. I got pulled into this topic about a year ago And I found myself working with community members to determine how we could respond to a variety of proposals. And over the past year, the community members, individuals, have worked together. We're the people that organized the tours. We're the people that surveyed the site. We're the people that did the legwork to understand all of this information. We're very pleased to be able to work with our community board to develop a variety of sort of mitigation items that could allow us to endorse the modification of the easement change, the modification of the easement, because we knew that we could enter into a memorandum of understanding which could protect and offset the changes, destructive changes to our environment. And I have to tell you, if you can imagine trying to explain to, dozens of community members that those 47 specimen trees are actually not a forest, that was really a tough one. We did some heavy lifting on everybody's behalf to get people to understand your point, that they are beautiful trees, but they are not a forest. But I'll tell you what, if I said, Sean, give me 46 cents, and I'll give you 32 cents as a pocket lint in exchange, this is a questionable equivalency that we're talking about. Nonetheless, and you'll see in my letter, we think that there are longer-term benefits to the communities, all of the communities around us, working with an MOU that will allow us to address ecological issues, allow us to address environmental issues. We recommend that the applicants, the university, work with DBW to enhance the Stony Run Stream Restoration Program, which is already underway, so that we can limit flooding that backs up into our community from Stony Run on their property. So we think that we have found a variety of solutions, of actions, which in the long term can offset this change in the forestation boundary. But I'll say that this was maybe we had a committee of 10 and we presented to the community multiple times. We've had representation from the school and from the ultimate developer. And I think that there was, and we polled the community. And we had very good response from the community on that poll. And there is support for this modification, but is all contingent upon an MOU which successfully addresses the concerns about the project. So I think that our board represented that in negotiations successfully. And I think that the board and the university and this developer reached a pretty good concession, which protects us pretty well. There are two items that I want to make a sort of a comment on related to my letter, which is in your packet. The first of those is that there has been a good dialogue, apparently, about how to reallocate the mitigation some point down the road. If this should all come to pass, if there's a zoning change, if there's a development, if trees are taken down, we think that there's a dire need to address deforestation across all of our communities, the campus, our neighborhood. We would like to see, we would like to, and I believe we've agreed to work in good faith with the applicants to equitably distribute the mitigation, both on their campus as well as potentially up that Stony Run stream into our community or where the community can add trees. It's a significant amount of mitigation. As you would, it's a lot of trees that would need to be replaced. We'd like to be able to work with the applicant to do that. The second thing is I don't know what you were doing in 1997, but I was a lot younger. We've got community members who weren't even born. That's how old this master plan is. If you look at the maps that were shown today, you will see that the campus is built out. If it's not a building or an athletic field or forest conservation, the only place that remains for the campus to grow is on the corner of Homeland Avenue and Cold Spring Lane, Homeland Avenue and Charles Street. Put the map up, you can see it's not protected. And in fact, it would be a very desirable property to develop. We have nothing from the university that would communicate anything about mass, about uses, area, landscaping, fences, all the things that go into a successful project, which is why we had requested, and actually the university has agreed to update their master plan. Unfortunately, through the course of negotiations, there's no date set for that. And things change, development plans change, so we understand that nobody wants to get pinned down. What we would say is, beyond this project, that a master plan is sort of a requirement for future campus changes. This is a school which has been going through challenges economically. They have a strong financial footing now, as they've explained to us. They're poised to grow, but we have no idea what impact that'll have. No one has any impact, not any idea what impact that'll have on the community. So we would request your assistance as this moves forward to try and it would even, I think, address some of the other community's concerns. See if there is a way that you could, that the commission could help us make that a part of this effort as it moves forward. Those are my comments. I can take any questions.
Are there any questions? Speaker?
I have a question. You spoke a lot about an MOU that you seem to be relying heavily on. Has that been executed? Meaning signed?
I think you're seeing a lot of nods, yes. The Homeland Community Association, as well as the other developer and the university, have agreed to this document.
I mean, while we can't condition approval on an MOU, I do think it would be fair and helpful to see an MOU were one to be available.
Hold on a second. Let's make sure that we understand what the basis of the MOU is. From what I saw in the presentation or any discussions, the MOU is between the university, Brightview Senior Living, and the neighborhood associations.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Brightview Senior Living is probably, I would assume, the future developer of a portion of this property and the adjacent property. Correct. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think that has anything to do with what we're presenting today.
Well, it goes to my concern that's
I
coming
think we're
down.
mixing apples and oranges, and
I
we
know.
are going down a very treacherous road
No,
saying,
but they're putting us on that path to a degree in the sense that they're coming for forest. They're coming to move the easement now. They'll be back on forestation in 2 months. They'll be back on subdivision, and they'll probably be back on rezoning. And so there's like 4 or 5 considerations, each of which we're being asked to take in the abstract, but as a reality, it's one big project. And so I think seeing it as a package has value, and that might just help us see things as a package, whether or not we can't condition anything on it, but we're someone to provide us extra information. We're always allowed to look at it, I think. I can't make anyone give it to me, but if they wanted to give it to me, I'd be happy to look at it. That's all I'm saying.
I don't want to upstage Doug, but I am prepared to offer some words. My name is Michael Burns. I am the Vice President of the Homeland Association. I'm here to speak on the association's behalf. The MOU, my understanding was submitted in the packet of materials you have for this application. And again, I'll let Doug answer, but to the extent you have questions for the association, I have a couple words, and then I can answer questions as well.
I don't care. I'm not relying on an MOU with a third party to make a decision on this.
Honestly, I mean, that's why we stand here to sort of accept and endorse the forest conservation easement. We couldn't do that if the community didn't feel comfortable with the MOU. So for us, we had, as a community, we had to resolve this with the applicants before we could stand up and support the modification.
So let me make sure that I understand this. So you've entered into an MOU, which has been executed. In return for entering into the agreements in that MOU, you've agreed to support the application.
I just want to clarify, I respect Doug, but he is not speaking on behalf of the association. That's true. So his asks here today regarding the campus master plan are his own asks, his individual asks.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
I guess I just wanted to add that I think the reason it kind of becomes relevant is because our regulations talk about a net public benefit. And the fact of the matter is they want to move an easement that has trees to an easement to count an area that already has trees. And I'm just trying to understand that public benefit. And although we're not going to condition anything on the MOU, it does help provide me with context on whether there's going to be a net public benefit.
Are there any other questions for either Doug or the Vice President, Mr. Vice President?
I would like to say just a couple points briefly, and I know this meeting has gone long, and perhaps this will help address your concern. So in the MOU, there is language, and the association was also concerned, obviously, with losing tree canopy right along Homeland Avenue, which obviously our neighborhood is adjacent to. In addition to the specimen tree mitigation, part of the MOU, the agreement that Brightview and Notre Dame and the association entered into, it provides for mitigation of non-specimen trees as well. Because the association did, yes, today before you is only the application by the university, but obviously the neighborhood is looking at it down the road as well and looking at what development is likely coming next. So for us, part of what we needed was more than just what's required under the city forest conservation requirements. That's why we also added the non-specimen tree replacement. As far as, to Mr. McCoach's point about the master campus plan and other issues with or concerns that the neighborhood or residents may have with the university, again, one of the provisions in the memorandum of understanding is that Homeland Association and the university have committed to working amicably to develop a bilateral agreement that we hope will address some of those other concerns. But from the association's point of view, we support the university's application here today, and it's not conditioned on an updated campus plan.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the speaker, for Mr. Vice President? Okay. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak? Yes, please, come on up.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zoe Gensheimer. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Community Engagement for the Baltimore Tree Trust. And I also happen to have grown up in the adjacent neighborhood, Radnor-Winston, and spent a lot of time in the woods near the library in my youth. So I'm very familiar with the area as well. Baltimore Tree Trust plants thousands of trees across Baltimore City every year. We're part of a larger group that has a citywide goal of reaching 40% tree canopy coverage, which is recommended for a healthy city. And we know that so I'm here to speak for these specimen trees that are quietly doing a lot of vital work for our city. We know that we can plant all these trees, but if we don't protect the large existing trees, we will not succeed in our goal. And we look at tree planting as an urgent public health issue and maintaining our canopy as an urgent public health issue. Trees are like massive sponges absorbing both heat and water. This is a highly treed area already, and so we sometimes are focused more on under canopy neighborhoods, which is where we are planting actively. But this location is upstream of other areas, and again, it's managing thousands and thousands of gallons of stormwater. Not to mention that oak trees, which we talked a little bit about, are some of the longest lived and most highly valued for wildlife of all of our native species. So if we talk about timelines here, we could go back 100 years easily, 150 years, 200 years. And so being someone who plants trees a lot and knowing the timeline that they work on is much slower, and therefore the value of protecting something that's much larger. So we've also talked about this younger stand that's riparian and the values of that being near water, super important for our upstream, again, Stony Run. Again, we've talked about the status of these woods, the invasives, the loss of our mature canopy there, the emerald ash borer. But I'm thinking that this area is not really possible to develop on. The proposed locations for 4 and 5 really aren't viable ever for development. So it's not really like an either or. It's a both. Like maintaining both those areas seems really vital to me in this conversation. And again, going back to the point of finally, like the public benefit that this will provide, the request for the public benefit. What legacy do we want to leave in Baltimore City? Trees. That's what I keep coming back to again and again. Again, this quiet work that they're doing. We don't see them all the time as infrastructure. They are infrastructure. Climate change, all of the major big crises that we're facing. I think it's a simple answer in the end of what we should be valuing. And I would say that's the legacy that I'm hoping to leave. Thank y'all.
Thank you very much, Odette.
Zoe Gensheimer, Gensheimer. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Just to thank you as a resident of one of the under-canopied neighborhoods. I appreciate all the work that Baltimore Tree Trust is doing.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this agenda item? Hearing none, I close the public hearing. Questions, comments, deliberations, discussions? Shoot. So I think I turned it on just as I was cussing. Is there questions, comments, deliberations?
I can get it started if I know people have. All right, I'll just start. It's a very hard case. It's very complicated. I see this need for public. I see our regulations, and there's a sort of a conflict for me. There's the regulations provide an opportunity to move the easement, which was designated to be permanent in the recorded documents, but there is an opportunity to move it by regulations. I think we need to respect that opportunity. However, the regulations also say that there needs to be a net public benefit. The proposal for me has 2.14 acres being reduced by 1.71 acres and only 0.4 being added. That's a 1.31 loss of what I would consider to be pretty significant canopy coverage in an urban environment. However, the easement is going to be moved, and I guess there will be additional protections for the existing forest, so that's a helpful thing. So we're offsetting at this point and balancing the loss of 1.71 with the potential additional protection of a forest that's very important and next to a river. So I'm trying to balance that. And then I'm also, and I don't know if it's proper to consider or not, but the community has done a heck of a lot of work on this, and the community perceives a public benefit in a document that I find to be pretty important to tell me why this is a net public benefit, because I'm sitting there and what I think is a very difficult consideration with the loss of canopy and really just a legal movement of an area, but with all of the additional things that will be required by contract here. And we didn't make the contract, that was unilateral, but it is in the record. I think it's fair to consider. I think it's really important, and I also would encourage the amendment that was requested, because for me, it's a very, 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 very close call as to a net public benefit. And I think with the MOU, and if the candidate would agree to it, well, I think the candidate did say they agreed to it, but the forest management opportunities or plan that the planning commission, I mean the planning department would have required, I think for me that gets it over the hump of there being a public benefit, which I see as necessary for this decision. So I would recommend full approval with the amendment. But that's just me. With the amendment proposed by the planning department.
So just to quickly agree with Tom, I think it's very hard to sell for a net benefit. It's very clearly at best a 1-to-1, which isn't a net benefit, it's a wash. So I think that the forest management plan becomes critical to put it over that hump, like you said, because it does take more than simply not building to protect trees. It takes the cutting of the vines and all those other things too. So if we can, further enhance the existing protected areas with the management plan, I think that is a significant benefit. Otherwise, I think it's at best an even trade, which doesn't meet the threshold.
We didn't actually clarify with
Okay,
the,
you had a motion?
No.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Secretary, will you call roll?
But could I ask for clarification, Mr. Chair?
I need a clarification, that's why. Are we talking about the entire easement, or are we talking about just areas 4 and 5? I was going to say that we never actually clarified with the candidate exactly what the proposal was.
The planning department's amendment or recommendation was for the management plan to incorporate only areas 4 and 5 is what I took away from what Amy had said. And so your motion would be for only areas 4 and 5.
Okay.
What I was going to recommend after the vote was that the university work closely with the community groups to incorporate all of the forest conservation area and solicit their help and assistance in managing the forest conservation area.
Fine with that. So my motion stands, I guess, as called, unless someone else wants to deliberate further.
So we have a motion, it's been seconded. I'm sorry, Marcia, did you want to say something as well?
You clarified it, thank you.
Okay.
Did you have something?
Well, I'm sorry. Why would that not be added to the amendment?
Well, okay, let me ask.
I'm just asking for clarification. I don't understand.
I'm sorry, sir. Would you, Chief of Staff, would you please? Would you be willing to amend that amendment to incorporate all 5 areas in your management plan?
I think respectfully to the planning commission members, we would not be in favor of adding FCEs 1 through 3 into the management plan. We would support adding 4 and 5. The cost for doing those management plans is substantial. We're willing to undergo that cost as a part of the movement. I did also want to note that the university plants over pretty much a dozen trees every year. We do mitigation around campus, and we're actually just starting up a partnership with the Department of Natural Resources to actually do some infill planting on some of those existing easements. So we're committed on our end to doing it, but as a part of replanting.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Nope. Public hearing's closed.
Thank you.
Okay,
I don't really like the answer personally.
then vote your,
I withdraw the motion.
there's been a motion, it's been seconded, we vote on it. If you don't want to vote for your own motion, that's fine.
But I didn't have that clarification, and now I have the clarification that the university is not willing to do it across campus, and so I'm going to withdraw the motion.
Is that, I don't have Robert's Rules of Order in front of me, but I think there's been a motion, it's been seconded. We got to call a vote on it, and if
Then you redo it, right?
right, if it doesn't pass, then you can redo it. So, Mr. Secretary, will you call roll?
Sure. Robin Allen?
I'm sorry. Disapprove?
Marcia Collins?
Approve.
Talib Horn?
Approve.
Tom Previs?
Approve.
Eric Stevenson?
Approve.
Justin Williams?
Approve.
And Sean Davis?
Approve. So that concludes our meeting for today. We look forward to seeing you back here on April 6th for our next Planning Commission meeting. Thank you.